once was light, now darkness falls. Where once was love, love is no more.
Uncle Vampire by Cynthia D. Grant is a 1993 young adult novel about a teenage girl named Carolyn, or Carrie, who believes that her ostensibly kind-hearted Uncle Toddy is actually a vicious vampire who assaults her and her twin sister Honey while they try to sleep. Her sister calls her delusional and insists that vampires don't exist and that Uncle Toddy loves them, but Carolyn holds on to her conviction and endeavors to do something about it. The plot is a clear metaphor for child molestation, with Uncle Toddy as a wicked pedophile. The book is a good example of how all elements of designing a novel are important. The core concept of a book is as important as the writing style, the character development, the themes, or how the plot plays out. Even if every other element is beautiful, if you don't nail that core concept, the book as a whole will suffer. Such is the case with Uncle Vampire, where the core concept is about helping authorities reach victims of pedophilic abuse instead of helping empower victims, a subtle but important distinction. I found the plot very compelling until the ending, at which point it fell apart, largely stemming from problems with this core concept. The plot focuses on Carolyn trying to make it through life one day at a time in her dysfunctional family, suffering Uncle Toddy's vampiric abuses until she works up the courage to expose him for the monster he is. Uncle Toddy is the worst part of her family, but the dysfunction extends beyond him. Her mother is clinically depressed and was at one point institutionalized, presumably for a suicide attempt, although the book doesn't go into great detail. And this is treated as an awful family embarrassment and never spoken about, but is a source of anger. Her father is generally belligerent and often gets in fights with her older brother Richie, who has stopped caring about his academic performance, has started taking drugs, and is standoffish in general. Honey just tries to keep the peace through smiling and being nice, which Carolyn hates. Her older sister Maggie managed to escape by going to college on the other side of the country. Carolyn dreams about following her to join her in a paradise away from her family, but this is unlikely to be realized anytime soon. She briefly joins her over the holiday, but must return to her own oppressive circumstances. Disturbingly, it is Uncle Toddy who is best at calming things down, because on the surface he looks like a nice, caring guy, and appears to be the glue holding the family together through their instability. However, he is later shown to be the cause of it. Uncle Toddy fits the sociopathic pedophile archetype to a T, in such a way that fits brilliantly with the vampire metaphor. He looks youthful, but is disturbingly old. He has powers of persuasion that turn people to his side. He's a parasite who lives off of healthy people, and he's mostly active at night and does creepy, intrusive things. The vampire attack is mostly symbolic of rape anyway, usually just thrown in for titillation or cheap scares, so it's effective as a metaphor and a serious portrayal of child molestation. There's a strong theme of doubt and ambiguity that works really well with the vampire theme. Carolyn knows that Uncle Toddy is a vampire who attacks her and Honey, but the idea is so absurd on the face of it that she must doubt it. Uncle Toddy himself would never admit it, and that's also consistent with someone who's not a vampire denying he's a vampire, so she struggles with whether or not her experience is true or imagined. The narrative illustrates this ambiguity, with her experiences with vampire Uncle Toddy and the mundane realm bleeding into each other, in a feverish uncertainty. Carolyn tries unsuccessfully to ward him off with a cross and prayers to God, using the metaphor of her clinging to her faith in a secular world to further emphasize her struggle to maintain certainty that Uncle Toddy is indeed preying on her as a vampire. Its charged atmosphere is very reminiscent of the Moth Diaries, and a bit of Carmilla, and comparison could also be made to The Haunting of Hill House. It is a compelling narrative, and I love this part of the book. It all falls apart at the climax, where the fundamental problems of the core concept are exposed. Carolyn decides to tell an adult about what Uncle Toddy is. Honey tries to stop her, saying that no one will believe that Uncle Toddy is a vampire, and she'll just get them institutionalized. They argue, Honey getting more and more desperate that Carolyn stop what she's doing. Carolyn ignores her and walks past her to the guidance counselor's office, where an authority figure would be obligated to listen to her. The guidance counselor's scene radically shifts tone, creating the sense that Carolyn is now in a bubble separated from the harshness of the outside world. It reminds me of some of the scenes in There's a Boy in the Girl's Bathroom. She has a chance to open up about the secret that's been plaguing her, but she's still resistant and reflexively tells lies. Again, like There's a Boy in the Girl's Bathroom. So she writes it down. She and her sister secretly call their uncle Uncle Vampire. Why? Because he is a vampire who sucks their blood. She shows the bruises on her neck. The counselor, Ms. Johnson, goes along with the premise for a bit before questioning the whole vampire thing. Carolyn is afraid of being institutionalized as a crazy person, but Ms. Johnson assures her that she doesn't think that Carolyn is crazy. However, she pokes and prods at the vampire story until Carolyn finally drops the bombshell. He fucks us. On the one hand, holy crap, a young adult book from 1993 used the F word. That is pretty badass. And what a great place to use it, too. It's such a wham line. On the other hand, aw man, it ruined the metaphor. It was such a great metaphor, too, and the book had to go and make it explicit. That's like if Alien were to end with Ripley waking up from her delusional fantasy to reveal that she's actually just a trucker who survived an assault from a serial rapist and made up this elaborate space fantasy as a coping mechanism. Wouldn't that just ruin the entire movie? Aside from ruining a great metaphor, it strips away the compelling narrative and reveals that at its heart, it's propaganda. The likability of the Carolyn character can't survive this twist because it shifts our understanding of her too much. With this reveal of how unreliable her narration was, it defeats the purpose of caring for this character. She essentially becomes a different character, now in an after-school special instead of a fantasy drama. We can care about a girl in her position, but it's hard to retain the affection we had for Carolyn as a fantasy character with this new mundane Carolyn. It's like the ending of Saint Elsewhere, saying that the show you watched for 6 years was really just a daydream of an autistic boy putting the people he knows in different roles. You can sort of care about these other characters in the sense that you would care about anyone, but they're not the characters you know, and you're forced to accept that all these characters you know and love, and most of TV, are fictional within the context of their universe. And the point is just, ooh, autism, so mysterious. Here, the point is, after school special. Oh well, let's dissect the rest of this mess. Carolyn freaks out for having shared the secret. Ms. Johnson helps her talk it out, and Carolyn explains essentially what she told us with the vampire metaphor now removed. Ms. Johnson says that she will then call the police. Carolyn begs her not to because her parents will be angry, but Ms. Johnson says that she is obligated to call them, and neither she nor Carolyn have any say in the matter.
You called the feds.
What? I got pinched!
Which is what happens when you call the feds.
This is my biggest problem with the work. When it comes right down to it, it's not about empowering Carolyn, it's about rescuing her. The last thing a victim wants is to have what little power she has taken from her. Even though she would be in a bad place at home, she would have relative power, which can be attractive in a situation where the alternative carries uncertainties. Through not emphasizing Carolyn's choice in the matter, such as by her choosing to talk to a counselor with the full knowledge that the cops would be contacted, this makes talking to authorities look very unattractive to actual suffering people. This could very easily promote victims not talking to authorities to retain what power they have. And then things get really weird. Honey, her twin sister, who's been around and doing things all throughout the book, doesn't really exist as an independent character. She's Carolyn's split personality, representing the side of her that tries to ignore the problems and keep the peace. This is actually foreshadowed quite a bit throughout the book, including in the very first lines, but there's no way that you'd actually read it that way without knowing the twist. It is written for reread appeal. It's true that trauma can lead to an externalized assortment of personality traits, but I would accept this element better if it wasn't a twist and was just presented on the outset as part of the character. The book is already written for effective rereads with that knowledge, so I don't see why it couldn't put the reveal up front. As a twist, it is really weak. I've seen this kind of thing done effectively once or twice, but it's one of those stupid cliches people generally know not to use, along with, "It was all just a dream." It really threatens the integrity of the narrative that we can't trust the narrator to that degree. Even though I don't like it, the reveal that the vampire metaphor is a textual metaphor works better because we already have a conception of vampires not existing, so it's just a shift into real-world rules that we already understand. It's a reverse of the From Dusk Till Dawn twist of turning a crime drama into a vampire story, and it's a bit less jarring as a twist to turn a vampire story into a real-world story because the real-world rules are more familiar, given that we already live with them. A twist that says a character we've read about described as a real character is actually just a split personality is a greater violation of the reader's conception of reality. It really throws off how we feel about Carolyn as a character. The way that this is revealed is through Carolyn repeatedly saying that she has a sister, using plural pronouns, and Ms. Johnson gently pointing out that she doesn't have a sister. So, does this mean that Carolyn has been speaking like Gollum this entire time, and no one thought that was strange? Honey was described as a popular girl at the high school. If that was Carolyn, did everyone just think that talking like Gollum was in style now? Did kids go home and argue with their parents in Gollum speak? Now, son, your mother and I are worried about your vocabularistics. But all the kidses are doing it. All the kidses. At least with Fight Club, there was a flashback to reveal the narrator fighting himself with weirded out onlookers. I do like one aspect of the split personality twist. As much as there is a real personality, it's Carolyn, which is to say, the bitter, angry version is depicted as authentic. There's no message about the angry side being bad and something she needs to get over to be a stronger person. She can be depressed and have her inability to express her negative emotions be depicted as the bad thing. And when she openly expresses them to her parents, Honey disappears, because Carolyn has matured beyond pretending that everything is alright. That is a powerful sentiment. The book wraps up with Uncle Toddy getting arrested, Carolyn moving in with Maggie and her boyfriend, and starting the healing process in therapy. The final words sum up the vampire metaphor with the statement that vampires, which is to say child molesters, can be defeated by bringing them out into the light. It's perhaps overly simplistic, but decent enough as a metaphor. I imagine the process of planning the novel went like this. 1. Core concept. Help authorities police child molestation cases by connecting with abuse victims. 2. Metaphor. Vampires. Intrusive parasites that violate helpless victims that can be defeated by being brought out into the light. 3. Metaphor implementation. Abused girl imagines her abusive uncle is a vampire. 4. Novel format. Fantastic depiction of scenario as a coping mechanism, with a twist ending. It's decent enough as metaphors go, and decent enough as an implementation, but flawed in the core concept. Empowering victims needs to be the highest priority, not how to empower the police force. It's not a black and white dilemma with good cops and bad rapists. It's a bad situation cleaned up by introducing an inherently flawed solution. Cops and CPS are not always effective, and the victim needs to be able to weigh the costs and make an informed decision. Otherwise, they're not going to listen to your propaganda, and it just becomes a piece of shock value to kids who won't deal with abuse. The well-written implementation of the vampire metaphor can't save Uncle Vampire from its fundamental flaws, and I ultimately cannot recommend the book as highly as I would recommend The Moth Diaries. Check it out if you're interested, but if you haven't read The Moth Diaries yet, I strongly suggest you pick up that book instead. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and shoot me an email if you want to request a paid commission video.